River Committee. I am joined by my colleague David Rue, and we will be joined soon by our colleague Corinne Price. We will bring this meeting to order. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Rue, is we'll start with some multiple public comment cards. And we have two. We have Herman and Spindler. So let's start with Herman, and you'll have 2 minutes for the items and 1 minute for general public comment. If this is your first committee hearing, brace yourselves. Okay.
Well, we know Nicholas Roxburgh of the El Pueblo de Los Angeles.
Stop, Mr. Herman.
Monument
we have the first interruption right there. Spindler, if there's one more, you're out of here.
What?
Okay, now you can start.
Well, Nicholas Roxburgh of El Pueblo, his communication to the mayor, fuck him and his appointment. Then we go into all these items regarding installation for the Walk of Shame. All those stars on Hollywood are disgustingly cracked, chipped, eroding, corrosion, all the fucking elements you can think of, except for one famous star, my 47th president, in which the wetbacks, I said the wetbacks are fucking it up and want to remove it. Why is that? I want Carrie Underwood's star there because I love the bitch. And what about Eric McCormack? I love him too, and I don't know who the fuck he is, but I do love Carrie. And what about Jennifer Garner? And what about the other Nissy Natch or Scratch your ass like Nuri? No one fucking cares about the stars but me and Wayne Spindler. The critics, the bureaucrats, the legislative body of the Ralph M. Brown Act. We're letting you know today that we're tired of David Rue's rape, how no one talks about it, and the motherfucker won't look me in the face to talk about the rape of an unconscious woman.
That's off topic.
When you're going to fuck the affairs of reports on request of approval for retroactively applying and accepting a grant of National Endowment for Arts under DCA, Black Doll Show. I am the Black Doll. I am the black sheep of City Hall. Fuck you, Joe Busciano, as your constituents told you on item number 13 of this agenda, and fuck you, Mitchell Farrell. Stop interrupting me, you bitch, the way Judge Carol Goodson put it to you. T-R-O, T-R-O, T-R-O.
And that was the eloquent Armando Herman. All right, you can't say you weren't warned, everyone. Next, we have Spindler for 2 minutes of items and 1 minute for general public comment.
All right. Yes, so now we'll talk about the Walk of Shame. Filthy, filthy, filthy fucking Walk of Fame. And do you want a star on the Walk of Fame so that it can be chipped away, so that it can be destroyed? No! All of these people should say no to the Walk of Shame. No! And then we get to number 2, Nicholas Roxbury, the fucking bitch. Yes, he's on the police permit review panel, and he's chicken shitting off of that panel to destroy the Los Angeles Historic Monument Authority. No to item 2. And then we have number 3, communication from the mayor to the reappointment of Miss Bitch Nagak Cow to the Board of Library Commissioners. Why in the world do we have to have a library commission? Nobody in this room can read except Mr. Herman, me, the puppet, and sometimes this asshole here. Careful, first warning. All right. So now we get to other items on the agenda. And what are they? Lots of more stealing. The zoo. You belong in the zoo. The San Diego Zoo. So go to the San Diego Zoo. Never go to that shithole, the LA Zoo, off of the 5 freeway. Filth, filth, filth. And I don't like it. Even the elephants shit all over the place. And even the monkeys throw shit at the council members whenever they see them once every 5 years. So no to that. Number 12, the National Endowment. The racist black doll show must end. No more. Yes, and now I get my 1 minute of general comment, which you cheated my friend out of. Now, we have an allegation
Okay,
of
there's
rape.
an interruption
What?
from
Hold on.
Armando Herman.
Stop
You
the
get
time. Stop
One
the
more and you're out of here.
No, yes, you're taking my time, yes. Yes, there was an interruption. Was there an interruption? No. He has a disability. And sometimes people have utterances due to disability. It's involuntary. Like, for example, Mike Bonin taking drugs. He can't help it in the other room. And then we have David Rue that can't help trying to take unconscious women in cars.
Sir, you have to
He
stick to the
also
subject
can't
matter of the
help.
committee.
What?
You have to stick to the subject matter of the committee.
Yes, okay. For the record, the fat one with the beard. Yes, the pirate. Yes, pirate. So finally, we say, shut this shit down. No more arts and parks. Tagging is art. Stop taking the tagging down. We love it. Thank you.
All right. That being said, we'll go to item number 3, Mr. Morales. Please read the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 3 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Bic Nok Cow to the Board of Library Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2023.
All right, and then I'll come back to the consent items after this. Would you like to say a few words, Madam Commissioner, on your reappointment?
Good afternoon. It's such an honor to be back here. It's been 5 years on this board. I've served as vice president and now as president, working alongside library staff and our brilliant city librarian who's here today on some really amazing programs, not just in basic library services that we've been providing, including getting our Measure L services back, such as hours on Sundays, but we're also doing really innovative programming, such as our online high school program. Career Online High School is providing diplomas, not GEDs, to people who dropped out of high school or who did get to go to high school, and it's really changing lives in the hundreds all across the city. We are also, our New Americans Initiative won us the gold medal of library services, which is like the Academy Awards for libraries. We've done some really amazing work in the arts. We have amazing arts programming as well. So I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. We're currently working to bring in voter registration at the library so we can track how many people we are having come in to register.
That's wonderful. So thank you for your service. And I think the library system is doing so well right now. I know we have John Zabo, the general manager. Welcome, John, here with us. We've had some challenges last year that I think were mitigated so expertly and swiftly once they came to light in terms of some of the security issues from last year. What's your take on that in terms of other security measures that maybe we need to engage in?
I think overall, we just have to look at which branches have different needs. I think we have certain branches that have security issues that other branches don't. So we've talked to the staff about investigating every single, because we have 73 libraries to consider, and some of them, like some of the downtown ones, I think have more needs, especially Central, because it's such a huge branch.
Mm-hmm. And for anyone who hasn't been to the Central Library recently, they have the best gift store there. I mean, it's really, really good, really great. Whoever does the buying there, really good gift ideas that are very Los Angeles focused. So I urge you to, that's one way you can support our libraries, by going to that gift shop at the LA Central Library.
It's run by our library foundation, which then gives the money back to the library.
Wonderful. Good stuff. Well, as someone who spent his childhood in the public library, I am a big supporter, and anything that we can do to support you in your work. And I think John knows this. But we really thank you for this and for your willingness to be reappointed. Mr. Rue, any questions or comments?
Well, no, I just wanted to thank you for your service. I have a very soft heart for the libraries. Previous to becoming council member, I too also served on a library foundation for the county side. So thank you for all your work, and we look forward to your service again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll see you for reconfirmation in council.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so what I'd like to do then, Mr. Rue, is on consent, the following items: 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I could have said 1 through 12. And 14 on consent with no objections. All right, so that's what we'll do. And then that takes us to item 13. And I know we have Mr. Arturo Chavez here. Item 13, and Mr. Morales, if you could read that into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 13 is a motion Cedillo Buscaino relative to the redevelopment of the Los Angeles River Center and Gardens.
Welcome.
Oh,
Welcome,
good
Mr. Chavez. Yeah. I think you're here to speak about this item and a possible amendment, I understand.
Yes, I've talked to your office. Thank you for hosting this. And I think there's an amendment here that will be on this motion, just removing the housing department, which is it's recommended to go to EWD, CLA's lead, EWDD, and then it's stated housing departments. We just take the housing department out, and we'll be fine with that.
All right.
Is that good with you?
Yeah, it's good with me. Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right. And so with that, we'll just approve the motion as amended, removing the HCID from the original motion. And that'll be the order. Thank you. So that takes us to item 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 15 is a motion O'Farrell Martinez relative to Measure A's projects and funds management framework and implementation status.
Wonderful. And we have enough seating, maybe, to go ahead and have Recreation and Parks, CAO, CLA, and City Attorney. Yeah.
Hello, Jennifer Shimatsu representing the CAO. We're really excited about Measure A. Through Measure A, the city expects to receive additional funding and grant opportunities. We anticipate receiving approximately $20 million annually for capital projects. There are also opportunities to apply for competitive grants. The CAO's office is currently working with the project management team that includes RAP, the CLA, the controllers, and the city attorney on a report that is expected to be presented to the next committee meeting that will include recommendations for the funding specifics and governance of Measure A. The full team is here today to respond to any questions that you may have.
All right. So you talked a little bit about the funding categories. Is there a formula that the funding allocations are going to be based on?
I'll leave that to RAP.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Bill Jones, Rec and Parks, over there, Grants Administration. So, yes, there is a formula-based. Measure A has about 6 funding categories, primary categories. 1 and 2 are formula-based on population and built-out square footage of commercial and residential properties, multiplied by the population of that area. The county has divided the city of LA into 43 study areas of about approximately 150,000 persons per study area. The categories 3, 4, and 5 are all competitive based. There's a formula for how much are allocated to each of those categories. That's under the control of LA County. And then there is a formula base as well for their maintenance and servicing, which the city would receive approximately $3 million for. And that is for the maintenance and servicing for the incremental difference of the older Proposition A and the upcoming Measure A projects that would occur. So an example there would be like Exposition Park, which doubled the size of their pool. The Measure A maintenance and servicing would pay for that, the second half size of that pool for the additional water, the additional electricity, and that type of work.
And can you talk about the timing of the releasing of funds? It sounds fairly complex, but not, unmanageable. and what kind of actions the city might need to take in
Certainly.
relation?
So for timing, we're looking at, the county is taking their final report from their Measure A.
Okay, one moment. There's another interruption from Herman. Okay, so you're out of here. Bye. You've been warned twice.
Damn, you fucking faggot dancers. I'm telling you, Mr. Kern Price just walked in. Oh, for goodness sake.
Excuse me, this happens every single hearing.
Put that man on a Christmas tree. Fucking racist faggot. Thank God for Judge Carol Goodson. Bitch.
And we are joined by our colleague, Corinne Price. Please continue.
Certainly, sir. So the time frame is the county right now is wrapping up their steering committee report and is scheduled for the Board of Supervisors to adopt the guidelines for Measure A. Once those guidelines are in place, which we expect to be probably the end of August, early September, the county will move to have each of the 88 cities within LA County, as well as respective not-for-profits and school districts, register with the county so that they can then begin to apply for grants. The application period we expect to open probably in the November to January timeframe. There is one caveat, and that is that Measure A is under litigation. The litigant, it's a sole individual, has not been successful in the first round. The item is under the appeal. The county believes that it will be favorable. However, they are cautioning cities to be cautious in their approach to spending monies, that any money spent should the litigant be successful in their litigation, that the cities would have to repay those funds.
Aside from that caveat, is this lawsuit holding anything up?
No.
Okay. And something that's near and dear to my heart, and I think Mr. Rue's going to have a question about this as well, and that is our joint use agreements with LAUSD schools.
Yes.
Specifically, can you clarify about the use of these Prop A funds for that purpose?
Certainly. So Measure A is open to school districts that have joint use agreements with park agencies.
Okay, so only if they have existing joint use agreements.
Existing or would enter
Or we can create
into
new ones. Got it. Uh-huh.
And so in those circumstances, the school districts could either partner with the Rec and Parks agency, or they could pursue Measure A funds on their own under the competitive grant side. So categories 3, 4, where they may have refurbishments of their fields, but they would then have to agree to the county's terms of keeping those properties open to the public into perpetuity, and having certain staffing hours, or I'm sorry, not staffing hours, but public hours for the public to use those grounds.
And so that would apply if it's county, but what about, we would apply the same agreement as per city, correct?
Correct. So the county is simply doing the overarching guidelines, but yes, it would be applicable to the city. So the city of LA would partner with LAUSD. In many cases, the Parks Department could apply for those funds and work with the school district, or LAUSD could apply on their own if they were to register with the county for Measure A funds.
All right, so it sounds very similar to the existing mechanism for joint use agreements. Okay, all right. And then in relation to the funding under Measure A and the study areas, and in the report, there are 43 in the city, and many of the study areas cross council district lines, which is fine. Constituents don't care where a council district boundary is, especially in relation to a park, understandably. How, with this overlap, how will these projects be selected? Will they be selected in a sort of politically neutral manner? Have you thought about, that?
We have, and we're still working through some of the mechanics, but certainly the county has required all of the cities in the county to have a very robust community outreach program. They want to make certain, and part of our applications will be to have that documented. So the way that we see this working is that we will be working with our community members. We will be working with our council and elected officials. We will be developing project ideas, and then we will be seeing which ideas will be eligible for the various funding sources that are out there for us to apply, whether it's Measure A or Prop 68 or any of the other funding applications that we have. Or
Terrific. You said the magic words, community outreach. So that's terrific to hear. Our colleagues, questions? Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really think that Los Angeles is in a unique position. As you know, we're ranked 66 out of 100 in metropolitan cities in the United States for park access. And while we are the second largest city in terms of population, we are behind in connecting our communities with our parks, mostly because of sprawl and the distances that create between residents and parks. So I'm so glad that LA voters reaffirmed this commitment to green space with Measure A, which gives us more tools to provide the green space throughout our city. And knowing that we're going to have Measure A, and it was going on the ballot 2 years ago, I introduced a motion to look into using funds from Measure A to support joint use projects with LAUSD, which would allow us to expand park access by utilizing LAUSD schools. And as we all know, most residents live close to a school, so opening a remaining school site that does not have joint use agreements could dramatically increase park space at low cost. So my first question is, what is the most costly part about developing a park? Would that be acquisition of land?
It would be, each park can have different costs depending upon the size and the scope of the project, but certainly construction and acquisition are the leading cost factors in developing a park.
Do we have any cost comparisons for a development of a new park in a dense, high-need area versus a joint use agreement with a LAUSD school in that same dense, high-need area?
So I don't believe that the department has looked at it in those respective terms, but certainly we can extrapolate from the cost of building a new park to a school having existing grounds and identifying the fact that if we don't have to acquire the property and there's minimal development of that school grounds to add amenities for the community to use, that it would be significantly less to go the route of using school grounds.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we could probably get that analysis further later on, right?
Yeah.
And adding on to the chairman's question about, we do know that Measure A could be used for joint use, but can Category 1 and Category 2 funds be used? And if it can it be for operational costs, or what? Is there any restrictions of any kind?
So Category 1 and 2, the annual allocations are predominantly for capital development. Category 3 and 4, which are two of the competitive categories, are a combination predominantly for acquisition and construction, but they do have some programmatic. We have reached out to LA County to explore this question. At the present time, they're indicating that staff costs would not be an allowable cost, but they're not willing to close the door completely. They're asking us to come back and present ideas where maybe under certain circumstances it might be allowed.
So operational staff costs will not be allowed in Category 1 and 2, but possibly 3 and 4?
Correct.
Currently?
Correct, under the programmatic.
Currently, okay. But you will be seeking more clarification?
Yes.
Great. And what's the current status of the working group on joint use and Measure A funding that RAP's putting together?
So right now, in terms of an actual task force, we don't have that yet, but certainly RAP is continually talking with LAUSD. We're strategically looking at local parks as where the schools are related to those parks. In those areas where we don't have parks, we certainly want to pursue those relationships with LAUSD and start to open those campuses as much as possible. So we are actively talking with LAUSD. I believe right now we have close to 30 joint use agreements, and we're certainly looking at all options on the table.
Great. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair, but I do have one recommendation. Should I?
Sure. Before you do, you prompted me to ask another one, and that is, Mr. Jones, you have fresh sort of conversations with LAUSD that I don't have, but in the last few years, they've really retrenched away, in my opinion, from entering into joint use agreements. They're requiring shorter terms. They're reluctant to enter into new ones, but perhaps they've become more flexible again. I'm glad to hear that RAP is talking to LAUSD, because I think that's been an issue in the last few years. But so it's important because we have to have willing partners.
Certainly. I have not been having those direct conversations, but my staff under the partnerships group have been engaging LAUSD. And we are, in the discussions that I've heard about, they are excited to work with us in certain areas.
Bernice Hollins, Office of the CAO. I just wanted to add a little more context to this discussion about LAUSD. As this committee is aware, Proposition K funds park projects. We do competitive grants. And the program is currently in the 22nd year of 30-year authorization. We have substantially completed most of the requirements under the program, but one of the last remaining requirements that we have to satisfy under the competitive grant program is awarding a very large block of funds to LAUSD. It's specifically for projects at LAUSD sites, so that we can make sure that we prioritize completing all of the city properties, the ones that are going to be managed by Recreation and Parks. We're most likely going to do that final competitive cycle towards the end of the program. But the point is, we have been having discussions with LAUSD because they qualify for this funds, and will continue. So it seems like we're going to actually merge these two discussions, both in terms of meeting the requirements of Measure A and also to make sure that we're going to be able to award this last block of funds for Proposition K. So and then I'll just say in general, we have a really good dedicated team who's working on this. The team who's been working on Proposition K, Proposition 40, 12, Proposition A. These are the experienced staff who's bringing all of that experience to the table to make sure that Measure A is structured correctly. And we meet on a weekly basis. So this is one of the issues that the working group will take up. We might need to elevate it to your respective offices to help us get the correct traction on the issue. But the bottom line is we knew and we have been planning for needing to make sure that we reach out to LAUSD, that we make the appropriate connections so that we can pave the ground for, like I said, getting this money out the door. We certainly recognize that it is a great opportunity to utilize those facilities because practically every neighborhood is in walking distance of an elementary school. So to be able to open those resources along with the ones that we've been developing with Recreation and Parks really has a significant benefit to add to the city.
Perfect. I'm glad you came up to add
I wait
to the
for my
conversation,
moment.
Ms. Collins. That's great to know, because I consider me a willing partner and an advocate, and definitely happy to sit down with anyone from LAUSD to sort of, reignite this movement. I think it's very, very important. So thank you.
And I think they'll want to come to the table, certainly, like I said, with the resources that we have at Proposition K. That is something that's under the city's control. And it's really, we only have an 8-year opportunity to get that money out the door.
Definitely. And let me just say, one of the school sites in the 13th District is LeConte Middle School. And they have a skate park that was built 10, 12 years ago. It's just locked up. And we're trying to sort of break through with LeConte Middle School so that perhaps we could enter into a joint use agreement for that skate park, because it's just not being used at all. We're getting lots of complaints, but we're having some difficulty.
And I understand with LAUSD, one of their concerns and restrictions, of course, is the operational funds. Most of these programs, and the Measure A is the same, it's very dominant on the capital funding, on the acquisition funds, but when it comes to operating and maintenance, it becomes largely responsibility of the city. They're LAUSD, basically the grant recipient. So in this case, at least we do have some programming dollars to add to it. So to the extent that we can help LAUSD come up with a strategy for how they would meet those additional operating hours, because you do require some type of, site security, some type of supervision there. That's really been one of the constraining factors of just meeting those programming needs to have a presence there while the facility is being utilized in the evening and weekend hours.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. Mr. Price?
Thank you. Thanks for the testimony and the report. We know that these Measure A dollars are going to really be important, especially in underserved areas, all over the city, but especially in underserved areas. And I'm just curious, this $22 million that we are projecting over the next, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years?
It actually goes into perpetuity.
Really?
Yes.
That's why we're
Wow.
so excited.
Wow. Who did that?
Thank you, voters.
Yeah, is that something? That's a great move. And then on the joint use, I agree. I think it really is a unique opportunity to leverage some limited resources. We've not had success, the kind of success I thought we should have in CD9 with some activities. But we're anxious to work closely with LA Unified, and I agree. This perhaps could be a nice incentive to encourage better and deeper relationships as we try to make sure we're providing resources for our families and our kids. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. And so I'll tell you what, we'll make the recommendations, and then I will defer to Mr. Rue on his recommendation in relation to the joint use piece of this. So we'll adopt the motion with the following amendments. Request the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code to establish the special funds that are necessary for receipt of funds under the various funding categories that Mr. Jones outlined that will be provided through Measure A. Also, designate the Department of Recreation and Parks as the city's grant administrator for Measure A. Instruct the CAO to ensure that their forthcoming report proposing a framework for Measure A implementation include 1, community outreach to identify priority projects, and 2, council input and formal approval for all projects proposed for Measure A funding. And Mr. Rue, we'll add the joint use.
Yes, I wanted to to add to your recommendations, instruct RAP to combine the council-approved instructions from CF 16-0841 regarding the joint use and Measure A into future report backs on this council file, and add the joint use agreements as a high priority for Measure A project criteria, because it'd be the most effective and cost-effective way to add a new park space.
All right. And we're good with that? All right. That shall be the order.
Thank you. We'll come back and report at the next committee.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you know what, Bernice, I think that you bring up a really good point, so that we can keep our arms around all these moving parts and sunsetting measures and incoming measures, maybe get a full report on how it all works in the coming months.
Okay, certainly. We're actually working on a Proposition K reconciliation report that we anticipate presenting. We should have it finalized in about 2 months.
Okay.
So once we take it to the steering committee, we'll bring it here. And it'll be a great opportunity to tout the many accomplishments that the program's made, and also share with you our vision for how we're going to plan for the sunset of the program.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Mr. Morales, that takes us to item 16.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 16 is a joint CAO-CLA report relative to a request for proposals for concessions at the Los Angeles Zoo.
And I know we have Ms. Terry Sauer here, and Mr. Morales, you'll probably weigh in as need be. And then we also have Connie from Glaza, if you would be willing to step forward. And John, also from the zoo, if you could step forward. And so what we'll do is I'll ask CAO-CLA to start to summarize any the outstanding issues, unresolved issues regarding the RFP before it can be released. If you would take it away, Terry.
Terry Sauer, CAO staff. Mr. Chairman, what you have before you is a status report from the CAO and CLA concerning the development of a request for proposal for concessions at the Los Angeles Zoo. We've been working with Glaza since late last year to review the draft concessions agreement with for the request for proposals. We've had some very good dialogue. However, given the timeline, and I should add, developing an RFP can be a very labor-intensive process. GLAZA came forward with a draft. We came back with corrections and edits because there's what the city looks for as a document. And so we're basically taking that document and working to move it into something that can be issued under the auspices of the city. We're close, but we probably need another 45 days to finalize that. The outstanding issues as we see them now are the capital investment language. That requires some significant revision to reflect the city process and have language that would have the proposer making a proposal, and then we would negotiate what those actual improvements would be long term. The zoo's in the middle of a master planning phase, and that will impact that. So it's coming up with language that can acknowledge that, but allow the process to move forward. We need to review some of the revenue sharing proposals within the RFP and revisit that and how that money will flow from the concessionaire to GLAZA and the city. There's also some ongoing issues with sponsorship rights, and as with any agreement that's been significantly revised, we have some just technical reformatting issues that are going to take longer. Once we transmit it to you for review and approval, that's the document that would be issued. So all of those things need to be lined up, and you need to have what basically represents completed staff work in order for you to move it forward. With that in mind, we're recommending a 6-month extension for the concessions agreement, but an instruction for CAO, CLA, Zoo, and GLAZA to come back within 45 days with the draft concessions RFP. We're also recommending that City Attorney and GLAZA work to revise within 30 days the concession services agreement, which is the agreement between GLAZA and the concessionaire. And so there were still some issues with that. It was based on the 1997 agreement, and it really needs some significant updating, and that there just wasn't enough time for us to get to that. The other thing is GLAZA and the Zoo share revenue based on the 1981 concessions agreement. Yes, I did say 1981,
Right.
and that goes back to its relationship when the zoo was part of Recreation
That was
and Parks.
before David Rue was born.
Quite possibly. Because the agreement has been in place since 1981, and we're moving forward with a new concessions agreement, if the market changes, the revenue sharing between GLAZA and the city does not change as long as that agreement is in place. So this is an optimal time for Zoo and GLAZA to go back and revisit that revenue sharing agreement in conjunction with the issuance of the RFP. So that's our final instruction. I'm available to answer any other questions, as are CLA, Zoo, and GLAZA.
Okay, I sense just from your report that all of these components will be dealt with so that GLAZA will be able to move forward with the RFP process. All these details will be ironed out.
That is our hope.
Okay. And then a couple of questions, and then, and I think, Connie, this might be for you mainly, but in 2016, the council instructed that the new concessions contract include a greater revenue share for the LA Zoo that ensures a larger distribution of commissions to the zoo. And are we all on board with that goal?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought as much. It sounds like the conversations are going really well. I'm encouraged. And you talked about the zoo master plan process, and John has come in and we've talked about it a number of times as well. And you've kind of already answered one of my questions, and that is you're cognizant of the master plan process and how it relates to the sort of finalizing of the RFP for the concessions.
What we would envision is that the zoo would make a copy of the draft master plan and their current strategic plan available to the proposers. Since it hasn't been formally transmitted to you yet, it's kind of because it's still in a development stage and the EIR stage, we're going to ask them to make it available, but that probably wouldn't be transmitted and as part of the concessions RFP, but we are cognizant of that, and that will impact and inform the type of proposals you get back, similar to what Recreation and Parks did with the Greek Theater and their capital component.
And John, what's your take on that in terms of the master plan and impacts?
No, I think that's fine, because one of the questions and the concerns was the various opportunities that are projected in that plan that a potential contractor would want to be aware of in making their bid. So I think it makes sense.
And I don't have all the details of the master plan, at least the current draft in my mind, but I think
I went over it with you.
I know. I do have the map imprinted like a photo in my head, but I would imagine that great care has been taken to encourage maximum sort of visibility for concessionaires, so that the RFP can be attractive once these improvements.
Yeah, a big part of the vision plan, in addition to providing, great care and welfare for the animals, was visitor services. And of course, that incorporates the concessions and the retail operations. So we not only made them attractive, but made them serviceable, and also hopefully being able to increase the revenues they produce.
Great. More people, more revenues.
More money, more mission.
That's right. All right. Mr. Rue, the zoo is in the heart of wonderful Griffith Park in the 4th Council District.
Yes, we're very proud of the zoo. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, the zoo, and I have a couple of questions, but I just wanted to first state that, the zoo in Glaza was instructed to transmit a draft RFP to this committee back in August of 2016. And in that meeting, I believe Glaza estimated that it would take about 12 to 18 months to issue an acceptable RFP, review proposals, select the vendor, and finalize the concessions contract. But it's been 2 years, and we have not been able to get an acceptable draft RFP placed before us. And instead, we are again extending the concessions agreement, which expired in February of 2016, for the 4th time. And we're going through the amendment number 4 to the operating agreement to extend this concessions agreement between the zoo and Glaza. But to be very clear, I don't believe that this current concessions agreement is best for the zoo and for the city. It goes without saying, I think the zoo is in urgent need of a better deal. To add to this, the zoo and Glaza were instructed by this committee to provide updates every 90 days regarding this RFP process. Clearly, a lot has not gone according to plan, and I'd like to know why. First, the CLA or CAO could jump in. After 2 years, why have we not been able to get an acceptable concessions RFP for the zoo?
During that process, Glaza had employed a consultant, and so we did have the draft agreement from the consultant. But as I said, a lot of it is a very tedious review. In terms of, and I use the word tedious because it requires a line-by-line review and looking at, what's in the best interest of city policy, and then providing that feedback. And so we did provide red line versions back to the department. I realize this sounds kind of highly bureaucratic, but it does require a significant amount of looking at the language, and those have been, as a consequence of those discussions, it has taken a while to come up with acceptable language, because you're looking at two things. Language that's going to be clear and concise so that a proposer can come in and look at it, and then language that's acceptable to the city from a contractual standpoint or from a something serving the needs of the city. So those are kind of the challenges we face, and some of the language did require significant revision, and we feel that some of the language still requires revision. Again, the city has come a long way in the type of RFPs that it has issued for this type of an agreement, and so with using the Greek Theater as sort of a model of what that can look like, that's sort of what we're striving for, and so that does take time.
Okay. Well, another question. This is directed at to John, to the zoo, or to Glaza. Why has there been virtually no communication from Glaza to my office, or I can't speak for the other members, or to the other member offices?
Well, we certainly welcome that communication with you. We have been working through the zoo on this, and recently with Terry and the CAO's office on it in the last several months, and we certainly welcome that communication with you.
Well, I welcome it too, and I offer it again. I've not just on one particular this issue, but any other issue. I welcome Glaza to come by my office to discuss any issues.
I'll be there next week.
So, and also, I understand that 2 years ago, specifically at the February 2016 meeting, Mr. Lewis, you stated that we should allow GLAZA to continue operating the concessions RFP due to the limited resources available to the zoo. But looking back to the December 2014 report, the zoo stated that the cost of administering a concessions RFP could be absorbed by the enterprise fund, and ongoing costs could be covered by the concessions revenue. So I wanted to see if I could have you comment from the CLA or the CAO. Are you able to confirm that if the zoo directly operated the concessions, the anticipated revenues and revenue and enterprise fund could cover the staffing costs for the managing of this process?
Mr. Council member, when the report you referenced, the cost was approximately, I believe, $512,000, partially in ongoing costs and another $250 for consultant costs. In reviewing that report and making numbers available, the amount is around the same. We estimate it would be about $312,000 in ongoing staff costs and around $250,000 for a consultant. If you were to go in that direction, currently the zoo, GLAZA receives around $400,000 from the commissionable, their 3% to manage the contract. Those revenues would be available. If you went in a change in direction, those concessions revenues would be available and could offset additional zoo costs. And so we do have those numbers available and have that. And
But I do want to state GLAZA is a long-time partner at the zoo, and I really respect that partnership. And but as stated in the website, GLAZA is a private nonprofit created to support the zoo and primarily responsible to seek and provide financial support for the zoo's program. However, as referenced several times in this discussion, the city, we do have abundant experience, and specific contract requirements could easily take this on, as recently shown by the Greek Theater, the RFP process done through the Greek Theater. The Los Angeles Zoo, a city entity, brings in more than $10 million a year in concession sales alone. We need this RFP process to be transparent, open, and competitive. A competitive RFP makes for a better agreement and a stronger zoo. So I really look forward to finally seeing the concessions RFP in 45 days, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rue.
Chair, may I respond?
Of course.
There were a lot of comments directed
That's right,
at me.
because I think, he actually asked a question to you,
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Lewis.
you.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your comments, Councilman. Let me just kind of back up. I think I recall what I said and when I said it. When we started on this process, I believed and strongly that it was in the best interest of the zoo and the city that GLAZA continued to operate and manage the concessions. Now, in that environment, though, the reason I said that, and I still think it's the best situation, was that GLAZA was not a city department, and they had the flexibility to meet the needs of a business, adjust to business outside of a bureaucratic process to make more money for the institution and for the city. That's changed as we've had this discussion. Now, the formula and the model seems to be literally another city department, and the RFP that's being developed looks like it comes from a city department. So whether that we're going to get the full benefit for that, I'm not sure. Whether the city can assume that responsibility, sure we can, but I'm not sure we're going to get the full value. I said this with the CAO, and I'll repeat it here. Greek Theater is not a good model for the concessions at the Los Angeles Zoo. I'm not talking about the RFP, I'm talking about the actual operations and what we have to do to serve the needs of the visitors. So I think we need to keep that in mind too as we develop this RFP, what's going to meet the needs of the visitors as well as bring in revenue for the institution.
Just a point of clarification. We're not suggesting that we're using the Greek Theater as a model in terms of language. We understand and, want to partner with the zoo to have something that is for a zoo-type venue. There's a very different model, a very different need of the types of food that's served, the types of beverage, the types of concessions. The Greek Theater is an entertainment venue, so we recognize that. However, what we do have and what success we have had is that it was a clear, concise, well-received product that led to a lot of interest on the part of those types of providers, and that's what we're seeking to provide to the zoo, something that serves its needs. The idea is not to take and say, oh, you need to issue the RFP that looks just like the Greek Theater. We want to help you get something that's going to get the same return that they have, but meet your needs.
Right, and thank you for that. And John, in 2014, I wasn't here. So I'm just trying to trace back because this has been going on for a long time. And that's why I think in the next 45 days, hopefully after this, the fourth time the lucky charm, so we need to get this information so we can have a clearer picture. Because right now we're just hypothesizing all these different options. So we would really, really like to work with you, and we welcome GLAZA to figure out. But I think first step is we need to get something in front of us.
We do need to get it finished, and we are dedicated to seeing that through. We too feel that there's a lot more revenue out there to be had through commissions. Times have changed, and we will work with our city partners to ensure that happens, and that we issue an RFP that is satisfactory to the city and will bring back as much revenue as possible. I like to think that we have shown some of that over the last few years, and some of the other things that we have tackled for the zoo. We had an enormously successful year this year in admissions revenue for the zoo. That included nighttime ticketed events, and I think we delivered $1.687 million over budget to the zoo. So we have the drive to do it, and we will do it properly with the city.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Price.
Thank you. I too just share the councilman's concern about the time it's taken us to get the plan together. I mean, I know there's goodwill on all sides. You talk about strides that the zoo's making, and we certainly appreciate that. Always still looking to figure out how we can expand that outreach, how we can do a better job of communicating with some of our communities, some of our underserved communities. And so I'm hopeful that this plan is going to also reflect a sensitivity to that and a willingness to maybe even do some new things or different things to be responsive in that area. So I look forward to working with you, look forward to getting the report, and want to make sure that we make this as a resource that's accessible to everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. And to Mr. Rue's comments as well, by no one's fault who's in this room, the zoo and the 21-year operating agreement and the 1981 agreement and the concession, it is one complicated beast.
Right.
And I don't, that's a metaphor for a zoo, but it really is. I've never seen anything like it. And to get this thing untangled since we've been working on it, the frustrations are very legitimate. And it has, it's been a head scratcher. But I think that we're now on our way. I'm going to be very, very impatient with any more extensions. I think everyone knows that. I think Mr. Rue's completely impatient. We're ready. So we urge a great sense of urgency so that we can get this finalized, refined, and ready for publication and get it out there. And I will say that leading up to today's hearing, there's been really great collaboration. So I think everyone is on the same page with moving forward expeditiously so that we can untangle this and get our arms around what I refer to as a beast. So with that, I'll make the recommended actions. Approve the recommendations in the joint report from the CAO and CLA with the following amendment for recommendation number 1. Request the city attorney, with assistance from the zoo department, to prepare and present an amendment to extend the current concessions contract agreement or concessions agreement between the city and the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association for an additional 6 months to February 17th, 2019, with a 6-month renewal option at the city's discretion to allow time for the issuance of the concessions request for proposals. Revision of the draft concessions service agreement and the selection of the proposed vendor subject to council. And I had a long conversation with Sharon So today, and she feels that this 6-month extension clause is necessary for the city's purposes at this point. We may not need to exercise it, but she felt that it was important for our purposes. So I'm not going to disagree with that. So without objection, that'll be the order. And let's get people to the zoo. During the day, during the night, let's keep preserving the species. That's important work. And onward and upward.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Morales, does that conclude our agenda? All right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just for the record, I'd just like to get the vote of Councilmember Price on items 1 to 14 that was approved on consent.
Okay.
With an amendment on item 13 to remove HCID on the list. If he's okay with that.
Thank you. Are we good with? Okay. Thank
sir.
you so much. Then that completes the order of business, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.